I was running a load of pressed grain through the Tessine corridor when the old waveform lit up my hold console, and for about 4 seconds, I thought it was a maintenance fault. It wasn't. It was a Pact signature. The kind etched into a hull's bones at the yard, not loaded after the fact, which meant somebody, somewhere, decades before I was born, had written my ship's registry into an agreement I'd never read and never signed. Pact 94. Mutual response, binding on any flagged hull within range, no opt-out clause. My freighter, the Verity Hale, had been quietly carrying that obligation the whole time, the way a man carries a scar he forgot he had until somebody presses on it. I'd bought the Verity Hale second-hand from a salvage yard outside Coalition space, and the paperwork that came with her was thinner than it should have been, half the registry history sealed under some old administrative code I'd never bothered chasing down, because the price was right and the hull flew straight. I understand now what that sealed history was hiding. Pact 94 didn't care that I hadn't known. It only cared that the obligation had transferred with the title, the same as the fuel lines and the cargo manifest. The trigger location wasn't on any chart I trusted. Outpost Severine, a council holding out past the Coalition's edge, the kind of place that shows up on manifests as a fueling stop and nothing more. Their distress wasn't aimed at me. It wasn't aimed at anyone human. Severine's panic button was a relic from a defense pact the council had signed with a long-dissolved consortium, back when the outpost still had allies who could spell their own name. Whoever struck that button mid-raid wasn't thinking about jurisdiction. They were thinking about the raiders coming through the outer ring, and they hit the only alarm wired into the wall. I want to be clear that I am not a warship captain. I haul grain and machine parts, and the occasional crate of something I don't ask about. But the Verity Hale has a modified plating skin and 2 turret mounts I never declared to the registry office, because declaring them costs more than the parts did, and because I learned a long time ago that empty space doesn't ask permission before it gets ugly. I'd never fired those turrets at anything that could fire back. Three raider skiffs, fast and underplated, working the council's docking arms like they were peeling fruit. They weren't a navy. They were the kind of opportunists who hit small outposts when the patrol schedules left a gap, and they'd clearly judged Severine's gap wide enough to risk it. From a distance, the outpost looked like most of the small holdings out past the Coalition's edge, a ring of habitat modules strung along a central spar, solar farms tilted toward the binary glare, nothing armed enough to argue with 3 skiffs working in sequence. I didn't have a fleet behind me. I didn't have a wingman. I had a freighter with 2 turrets. Nobody on Severine had any reason to expect. An obligation I hadn't agreed to in any way that felt like agreement. And about 90 seconds to decide whether I believed in the wiring that had brought me there. I throttled up anyway. Whatever the Pact wanted from me, it could ask the question after I'd answered it. I took the first skiff broadside before it noticed I wasn't cargo. The second one ran. The third tried to hold its line at the council deck's docking collar, and I put the Verity Hale between it and the glass, because that collar was the only thing standing between the raiders and whoever was inside that chamber. It held, barely. The skiff peeled off when its shielding gave, and then the ring was just smoke and drifting hull plate and the kind of silence that comes after, when nobody's sure yet whether it's actually over. I docked because the Pact said I had to render aid, and because I wasn't going to fly away from a council chamber with its outer wall scorched black without checking who was breathing. Council Elder Vethra Oss, by the markings on her collar. She looked at me, at my plating, at the registry burn still smoking off my hull where the skiff's last volley had caught me. And she didn't ask who I was first. She asked what I was responding to. I told her. The Pact signature. 94. Her hand was still resting on the panic switch on the wall behind her, fingers curled around a lever that had been installed before either of us was alive, and I watched something cross her face that wasn't gratitude, and wasn't fear. It was the particular blankness of someone doing arithmetic they didn't want to finish. That switch was wired to the consortium, she said. They dissolved 11 cycles ago. I struck it because it was the only alarm on this wall that still had power in it. I did not know it would reach anyone. I certainly did not know it would reach you. I didn't have a clean answer for that. I told her the Pact didn't specify who picked up the line on the other end, only that somebody had to. She looked past me, out through the scorched glass, at the drifting plate that used to be a raider skiff, and she said it again, quieter, not for my benefit this time. We did not aim it at you. I know, I said. Nobody on my side aimed me at you either. The wire just happened to still be live. She didn't laugh. People in her position rarely do. But something in her shoulders came down half an inch, the kind of release that isn't relief, so much as the body admitting it can stop bracing for a second. The outpost wasn't whole, I won't pretend it was. 2 of the docking arms were gone, and the supply depot that fed half the outer ring had taken a direct hit before I'd even cleared the lane. We didn't arrive in time to save everything, and Vethra Oss never once asked me to pretend otherwise. What we did do was hold the collar, and that meant the council chamber stayed pressurized, and that meant the 40-some people sheltering behind that glass walked out of it instead of being vented into the ring. I spent the next several hours doing the unglamorous work that nobody puts in the report. Running cable to a habitat module whose backup power had failed, helping an outpost medic sort a triage line by who could wait and who couldn't, hauling scorched plating off a corridor so a stretcher could pass. None of it required turrets. Most of a rescue I've found doesn't. Vethra worked alongside her own people the whole time, sleeves pushed back, giving orders in a voice that never rose. And I noticed she checked the panic switch on her wall twice more before the night was done, like she didn't quite trust it to behave now that she knew what it was actually wired to. I stayed long enough to help triage what could be triaged, and to give the outpost's overworked comms officer my actual registry number, the real one, in turrets and all. So the next time somebody struck that switch, they'd at least know what kind of help might show up. Vethra watched me file the report myself, standing at her own console, reading it twice before she signed it. Pact 94, she said, like she was tasting the words. I will have someone look into why a defunct consortium's old wiring is still drawing current on my own wall. Probably ought to, I said. Unless you want a freighter pilot showing up uninvited every time the power flickers. She looked at me for a long moment, and there was no slow shake of the head, no theater to it. Just a woman recalculating, quietly, what she actually knew about the wires running through her own walls. I would rather that, she said finally. then the alternative. I filed my half of the report on the way out, logged the turret discharge I'd never declared, and let the registry office sort out what penalty, if any, applied to a man who broke a regulation in the act of answering one. Pact 94 didn't care about my paperwork. It never had. It only cared that the line stayed live, and that somebody, eventually, picked it up. I think about how close it came to staying dead, and how little it would have taken for nobody to be listening on the other end. We weren't supposed to be the ones who answered. I don't think that mattered, in the end, half as much as the fact that somebody did.